Hey, good morning. I think it's Wednesday, and I forgot last week, but let's again just briefly remind everybody that we can do a Weedless Wednesday if we choose to do that. Often we think we can't, but you might surprise yourself, so give that some thought. So, today, what I want to talk about is something that we've all been challenged by lately, and that is patience. It's an interesting thing. I've been accused of having ridiculous amounts of patience. I know a couple of years ago, I had to um, excuse a kid from one of my drug classes because he was being a fool. And he went to the office, and the vice principal looked at me and he said, "Really? You just got kicked out of class by the most patient guy on the planet. Like, come on." Anyway, I'm not sure that that's true, but it's a topic that I think is really important. And so again, I've got a PowerPoint to kind of guide us through this. So I do that. I got to do that. I got to do that. I got to do that again. There we go. Okay, patience. The capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry and or upset. So that's kind of a big load. But as we look at that and understand, particularly with what's been going on the last couple of months, that this is a huge issue for everybody because we cannot do much about what's going on other than adjust our attitudes. And our attitude is the thing that gives us patience. So, capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering. And last week we talked about suffering quite a bit. It's that Buddhist idea of, whatever is making you uncomfortable is suffering. And we have to decide how we want to look at that. What we said last week was that we, rather than fight that, we have to embrace it. As soon as you start to fight against anything, whether it's traffic, red lights, other people, situations, as soon as you start to fight something, your stress system activates. And if we've learned nothing else in all of these little classes that we've done over the last little while, that when you're stressed, it reduces your ability to think. And so if you accept what's going on, uh, your system relaxes and you start to feel okay. So the opposite of patience is ego. And ego is, again, an interesting topic. And often we confuse ego with vanity. But really, ego is that belief that things should be the way that we want them to be. And when they're not, we start to do all sorts of things to try and reorganize the universe so that it suits us. And, it's like it says they're wanting things or people to the way that you want them. And you'll hear this in the TED Talk that I'm going to show you today. But people whose egos are out of whack or are too big are always looking for something to complain about, always looking for something to be dissatisfied with. And so if you're feeling a lot of dissatisfaction, if you're feeling a lot of uh, discomfort about what's going on, again, you need to look at yourself and see what's going on there. Um, And so here's just a little cartoon. Is it right to remain ignorant? I don't know, but I refuse to find out. And so when people's egos are activated, they don't want to look at themselves and they don't really want to look at anything any different. So talked about patience and tolerance. Tolerance is accepting people as they are. A few weeks ago, I did that one class on patience, tolerance, kindness, and love as a way to kind of look at how we're managing things. So tolerance is accepting people as they are, and it fits in with patience. Do you ever hear the words I say? Just the ones that I like. Like if you don't really listen to people, whether you like them or not, you're not really being tolerant. And patience is accepting things as they are. So traffic, weather, coronaviruses, whatever it is, if it's outside of our capacity to change, we have to make it work for us. The problem is, and it's like this little guy, God grant me patience, like we want like right now. And same thing here. You have to learn to be patient. I want to be patient right now. I've heard that over and over again from lots and lots of people. Like, well, yeah, I'll be patient, but like, hurry on. So here's Eckhart Tolle. I don't know how to say. I don't ever say his name correctly. I don't think. And if you haven't watched him, he is definitely a character. And but lots of really good information. And this one isn't too long. I think it's like 12 minutes or something. Oh, I hit a button. Sorry. No, I can't find. Oh, for heaven's sakes. There it is. Patient.
So it's when the your surface reality becomes frustrating, that's the beginning of potentially finding the portal into the awakened state. But when your surface reality is relatively pleasant, by the way, it doesn't stay like that, but for the time being, let's say it's relatively pleasant, you're not really motivated into finding the deeper essence of who you are, because why not let's fly to Paris. We'll have a great meal there. Where you feel a little bit uncomfortable and discontent. Okay, let's go there. Let's do this. Let's try this. More sensory experience. You can buy any sensory experience. And then after a while you'll find being in your comfort zone after a while becomes your discomfort zone, and then finally you've made it, and then finally there's a possibility of awakening. So this is the challenges that we encounter in life. Many people have an attitude of resentment or a feeling that there's something very wrong with the world, or there's something very wrong with my life, when they're being challenged by difficult situations, difficult people, loss of some kind. Did I mention difficult people? Oh yes. You may find a lot of your suffering, unhappiness, strangely enough, comes from other people. They are so difficult. And often the very people that were supposed to make you happy, suddenly they don't fulfill their purpose anymore and they make you unhappy. It's called the divorce court. and there's an implied belief that this shouldn't be happening. Life should unfold beautifully without all that stuff going wrong. And to some extent, yes. To some extent, especially as you live more consciously and no longer totally in the grip of ego, you're beginning to awaken, there's an awareness, you no longer create unnecessary suffering in your mind through reactivity, you're able to drop the unnecessary baggage of creating narratives and creating your own suffering through your narratives. You let go of that, so it's a huge chunks of suffering begin to fall away. But challenges still come. Even then, and even then, it doesn't mean everything will now go totally as expected and as it should. There's still loss happening from time. You still come across difficult people. Oh, is that, I don't want any more difficult. Yeah, but they're everywhere. As the famous French philosopher said, hell is other people. He looked very unhappy, by the way. Well, the only photo I ever saw of him, he looked unhappy, so I don't know. Jean-Paul Sartre. It's true, other people are difficult. So your life improves immeasurably as you become more conscious, but it will still challenge you. And it won't mean you will never experience loss again. It doesn't mean things may not go wrong still occasionally, not perhaps as drastically as before. You don't create your own mayhem and chaos anymore. But challenges, yes, different kinds of challenges come. And if you no longer complain that a challenge shouldn't exist, difficulties shouldn't exist, obstacles shouldn't exist, things should not be cancelled, they shouldn't go wrong. If you drop that expectation, then it's actually fine. But be careful that if you still have an unspoken assumption that there's something wrong when challenges happen, that would draw you back into unhappiness. There's nothing wrong when challenges happen. We grow through them. And if you hadn't had yours, you wouldn't be here. If I hadn't had mine, I wouldn't be here, so we wouldn't be here. We would not be here without it. And so retrospectively, we can actually be grateful for the suffering that we've had, retrospectively. The question is, the challenges of life, when they come, do we transform them into unhappiness, or are we able to just face them and then go with them and do whatever action is possible or necessary, or totally accept that at this moment, this is how it is. So when you live more consciously, you no longer convert the difficulties of life, the inevitable difficulties and challenges of life, you no longer convert them into unhappiness, which means they don't contribute anymore to your unhappy person identity. You're no longer becoming a more unhappy person. You'll be surprised how many people's main sense of identity in this world is unhappiness. And they're just looking for the next thing to be unhappy about. And they always find something, or to complain about, to be angry about. There's an expression that then you become a grievance looking for a cause. And of course, you always find the causes. So, important thing then to realize that I'm sure there are some of you who have carried the burden of a very unhappy self for many years, and perhaps you're just beginning to step out of it, you're just perhaps beginning to transcend it, and there's still millions in this world who carry the burden of an unhappy narrative in their minds, unhappy self. And that means you think about then my life. Why did it come to this? Why didn't my expectations that I had when I was 20, why didn't they work out? Why did my marriage collapse? Why did I lose that job? Why did I succeed and made millions and then lost them? Why? Why did I work for nothing for 15 years and then the whole thing that I built up collapsed? Why? So dreadful, dreadful. All this begins to dissolve because you realize you're unconsciously creating suffering and strengthening the egoic personality through that. And then my life then is just memories. And you begin to realize, as I sometimes put it, or people find it a little weird, when I say my life isn't a correct way of putting it, because you don't have a life. You don't have a life. Because if you have a life, there's you and life. How can you be separate from life? So, if you don't have a life, one could even say you can't even lose your life. You can only lose something that you have, but you are life, you don't have a life. I am life, and life and consciousness are synonymous. It doesn't mean that every form of life is conscious, but every form of life is, the way I see it, is matter, the table, a rock, mineral. It's like frozen consciousness. Plant life is like liquid consciousness. It's an analogy. And the mind and thinking, and beyond that, consciousness itself is like vapor, mist, it rises. This is a water analogy. All life is manifestation of the one underlying life or consciousness in manifold forms. So you are.
Like, of course, this is a thinking thing. And he talked about it really well, and that transformation that so many of us are, have heard about and are looking for, is the transformation away from expecting things that should be a certain way to understanding how to make what we have work for us. And I've talked about it a couple of different ways, but when we do feel suffering, when things are the matter, if we say thank you to them to start with, accept them, and not fight them, then we create the chance to change. One of the things that uh, we have to be really careful about with patience is asking for it. If you ask the universe for patience or pray for patience, usually what happens is you get delivered a whole bunch of opportunities to test your patience, to learn how to be patient. The other approach to this, which is much more comfortable for most people, is to start to generate the idea that you have enough. So I have enough patience, and what I have enough of will continue to come to me today. That relaxes you. If you keep telling yourself, oh, I'm so impatient, or I don't have enough patience, that's what you focus on. If you tell yourself, I do have enough, I have enough patience, then your system will relax and you'll start to be able to see things a little more clearly. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of that. And we will be back tomorrow. Have a patient day.